Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Beat the Clock podcast. My name is Michelle Rubio-Garcia, and I am here to help you grow. Through the many timed interviews I'll be having, all guests will answer 4 time-specific questions. By answering these questions honestly, we hope to show you how each moment connects to the next. Whether they are entrepreneurs or thought leaders, all are invited to sit down, chat with me, and show you a realistic depiction of success. By doing so, we hope to change your mind and empower you to beat the clock. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Beat the Clock. If you're here, you really want to either be inspired or take action. So either one is something that I want to honor right now. I want to take the time and give you the space to really own that. You made a good decision today, and I'm proud of you. Okay? Those that may criticize you are not ready to commit to themselves. So when people make a mockery or dismiss personal development, they're really just coming from a place of insecurity. You are here because you are secure enough in yourself to indulge and develop. So that's fantastic. And so, yes, I am here with you today, and I want to start the same way we always do. I'm all about empowering you and all about giving you ownership. So we always start with the same 3 affirmations. Say them with me if you know them. And if you don't, just follow along. It's okay. Take a deep breath. Number 1, I trust myself. So if your day has been very stressful, take the time to breathe. It's okay. You have it under control, or you will be okay, right? Number 2, my time is valuable. So again, every minute counts. And if you're here, you know this. And number 3, I can control how I use my time today. So maybe you've surrendered your power before, but you can really decide to just change that. It's that simple, right? And so I'm going to talk to somebody who is very certain about what they're doing with their time. And it comes actually from quite the pivot. I didn't know this about him, so I'm really glad we exchanged some dialogue. And honestly, he came at a point in my life where I experienced my first dip in my faith after fully committing to Jesus in January of 2019. So I've never seen a Christian like him that just speaks about faith like if it's a matter of fact. I think a lot of people still hide from their faith or compartmentalize their faith because they're scared of the judgment that comes with it. So to hear him stay so true to himself is honestly very inspiring. And so I am really happy that he obliged. So he was so sweet too. I really feel like I butchered his name when we were in the interview itself, right? I was like practicing with him beforehand, and he was probably just, being patient with me. But I want to take the time to say it correctly here. His name is Oladimeji Ajegbile, and he is from Nigeria. And so, again, this is the second time BTC goes, outside of the U.S., and this is an amazing, incredible person. So he is a designer and podcaster that explores what it means to live a creative yet simple life. He hosts a podcast called The Simple Creative, and he enjoys sharing his thoughts and insights on design, lifestyle, and branding via storytelling on Instagram and YouTube. I'll put his handles in show notes and or YouTube captions or whatever. But yeah, I can't wait to share him with you. Oladimeji, thank you so much. If you're listening to this, you are amazing. So yeah, let's see if he beats the clock. And the clock starts now. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Beat the Clock. BTC recently went international with somebody in London, but now we hop across the continent to Africa, and we have an amazing guest with us that I'll need some assistance with here, and he'll correct me, but his name is Oladimeji Ajegbile.
Yeah, that's correct.
I got it?
Yes.
Yay! Homework works. And he is a fellow podcaster, and we're really happy to have him on BTC. Hi, how are you?
I'm doing fine. Thank you so much for having me, Michelle.
And so this is a little surprise that I like to do for my guests here. So I always like to tell them in the beginning of the interview how I interpret them, right? On social media, we portray one person, and I just kind of try to see what your whole aura is and what your energy is. And I know we have a lot of labels we ascribe to ourselves, right? We're podcasters, we're designers, we're this, we're that. But who are we at our core? That's what I try to do. And so for me, I think of you as a crisp creator. And I don't know if you would agree with that. We can talk about that, but I'll tell you why. So crisp, and I had to like Google it. I use that word a lot, but I wanted the exact definition. So crisp means invigorating, clear, clean cut, and well-groomed. It can mean all of those things. And so for me, I feel like all of your content and the way you speak, your swagger, if you will, all of it is very intentional. It's very simple. And we'll talk about your whole project there. And it's just, it seems like it comes from a really solid conviction in your heart. So I chose those words very intentionally. And so regardless of what you create, it's, to me, it seems like it's well-intentioned and it's hoping to be impactful. And so you're creating community, you're creating awareness, you're creating so much more than the products you're creating. So yeah, I think of you as a very crisp creator. What do you think?
That's very generous and that's amazing. Thank you so much. I think, yeah, you're very accurate, I would say. Not to be proud or anything, but, having a foundation as a designer or as a creative, I studied architecture in the uni. So, yeah, I think that's very accurate. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, I'm only saying what you're, I guess, creating. So I'm affirming that it's interpreted correctly. So here we go. We are going to jump into question number 1, and this is where the timer starts, but don't freak out. So number 1, who were you before your uni career, before the design? You said you do the podcasting, the graphic design, all that. Who were you and what got you to who you are now?
All right. I would honestly say that I didn't know who I was, until I started doing the things I'm doing right now. It got to a point where, so I studied architecture in the university for my first and second degree. Oh, wow. And during that period, I could honestly say that I was just, moving through time, just trying to figure out what I'm, here for. It's like a custom in my part of the country here where you have to go to school just to make it in life. Like there is, if you tell your parents that you don't want to go to the university, you just kind of come off as, irresponsible. So I was doing all these things just to fulfill all righteousness, just to make sure that they see me as someone responsible. But it got to, so it was in my final year, I started to really, understand what is even the purpose of me being in this particular university? Why am I, studying because I'm studying? And it pushed me to a point of wanting to, kind of create some sort of self-discovery. Mm-hmm. And I was just one guy who went to uni and didn't have a purpose. I was just moving through everything, wanting to please parents, please lecturers, please friends. And I didn't really understand who I was. So I was just a guy trying to find himself. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
And like, was there a certain moment that made you start asking all those questions, or it was just this gut feeling that you had?
Yeah. So there was a particular time I went for, so I was invited for a church program. So a friend invited me, and then getting to that particular, event, I realized that I was, they automatically made me part of the planning committee for another event that is meant to come. And during that planning period, we were doing all sort of activities, making sure that Bible study is in check and so many other things. And on the day of the event, there was a particular session, that we had some sort of the Holy Spirit impartation. And then they gathered everybody together and people started, manifesting the Holy Spirit. And I was called, they called all the organizers that let's come out and lay hands on people. Mm-hmm. And I was looking at myself that, wait, I don't even have the Holy Spirit. How would I lay hands on someone else? I don't know who I am. So why would I be able to do this? And that was where I decided I just went on my knees and started praying that I need to discover who I really am. And I think everything started from there. So, yeah.
So it was this, a spiritual encounter with God, you would say?
Yes.
And that was at what age?
It was in 2014. So I would say I think I was 17 or 18 then. Yeah.
Wow. So that's a pivotal time. And I mean, you still kept going into architecture, you said?
Yes, I still studied architecture, yeah.
So then how did okay, I'm trying to like wrap my head around it. So you got a second degree in design?
Architecture. So my first and second degree were both in architecture.
Okay. And then now that you're designing and all that, that wasn't from a degree, that was all self-taught?
Yeah, it was just self-taught, yes.
Oh, wow. And so was that nerve-wracking to make that kind of pivot from something that you concentrated so much on and then just kind of taking a risk and exploring this new world?
So for architecture, it's more of about the buildings. Architecture is basically about buildings, spaces, structures. But then I wanted to understand design beyond, these things, beyond buildings. Like I wanted to understand design as a way of life.
Mm-hmm.
So that was what really caused the transition. And then I started to really understand why is there design in the first place. And, looking at how things panned out, the basic fundamentals of design from the very beginning were things we were taught in architecture school. So it was easy to apply the same principles to being a designer later on. And the only difference is that now I'm a designer, but I'm focused more on building people and brands. But while I was an architect or studying architecture, I was focusing on buildings only. So yeah, it's very close. The principles are the same. The guiding lines, the guiding principles are the same. The only difference is that one deals with buildings while the other one deals with people and brands or community, if you will.
Yeah, that's what I was about to ask if they carried over because it is a lot of the same skill set if you
Yeah.
really sit down and think about it. What did your parents say?
Uh, they still feel I'm unemployed.
Okay.
you know, because every time they probably come to my workspace and they're like, you just keep staying in this room without anything. You're just facing your computer. And is this like a full-time job? And I tell them, this is what I do for a living.
Uh-huh.
And it got to a point that my dad still sees me as unemployed until I started helping out with, a couple of things in the house, bills, paying for electricity and a couple of other things and cable. And it was like, so do you really mean you earn money from just sitting down in front of your laptop? And then, that was when I started to explain to him that it's more than that. It's like, you working for yourself, but now, it's on a bigger level. So, yeah, they didn't really agree with it at first because my dad really wanted me to, lecture in architecture, but I guess he has to just deal with it.
And what do they do? Are they into architecture or?
My dad used to be a custom officer,
Oh,
and
okay.
my mom was a teacher, but they're both retired now.
That's cool. No, yeah. And was there anyone else that kind of was also a little skeptical? Because I mean, if you went to architecture school, obviously most of your close friends at the time were all concentrated in that. So anyone else other than your parents that was kind of giving you a little bit of questioning?
Yeah, a lot of persons wanted to understand why someone who has a master's degree in architecture would just leave everything and then follow a different path. But it took some time for me to explain to them exactly what I'm doing because I wanted them to realize that I'm not just, I didn't just decide to shift away from this entire thing. Um, we all have our callings, different callings as individuals, but the skills we've been able to build in ourselves is what really helps us fulfill that calling. And I kind of saw my calling as more than just architecture, or more than just a brother or a sibling to someone. I kind of saw myself beyond that, and I wanted to understand what that part of me was. So all these kind of bothered around me trying to help people get better and grow from
Mhm.
sharing my experiences, the things I've learned and experienced over the years. And, I understand that a lot of us actually, we are the same in a way because most people I actually, engage with right now, they are creators also. And then they're trying to build the same process I was able to go through some years ago. And, helping them out with the same experiences, with the same stories that I went through is like a shortcut for them, sort of. And that's what like one way for them to actually not make the same mistakes I made. So I saw it as not just, this career thing. I saw it as a way of life for me. And that's what I made them understand. And the moment I explain this to people, they, I think they get it at first and it
Mhm.
becomes easier to understand what I'm doing and why I'm doing it.
Good. Hey, and you did good with time. So jumping into question number two, it blends in perfectly. So let's talk about it. I discovered you and I reached out because I like your idea of the simple creative. And when I was looking through your feed and through the feed of the podcast, I really enjoyed a lot of the content that you put out there because it seemed very direct. And so one of the posts that really stuck with me was when you said that to be greedy with your content is well, yeah, selfish. And that was the first time I looked at content in that way, because you said, you know, people need your stories, like you're saying, people need your message, the way you think, your perspective. And so what I keep thinking about right now when you're talking is the word responsibility. So the second question is always, who are you now? And we know you are the simple creative, but what does that look like now? What does it like, how you're saying it's a way of life, so let's just talk about what that means to you.
All right. So I see design as a way of life because everything started out of nothing. Like going back to the story of creation, our
Right.
God, spoke things into being. Like literally nothing was in existence, and then something started to happen. And then if you look at after everything God did, He kept saying, and God saw what He has done, and it was good. And then at the very end, He said it was very good, and it just my mind just started to play around this entire idea that what if everything, there's a particular system to how things were made. God created one thing before the other. It was systematic. It was like in different steps. So, and these are the things that actually guide design, as it were. So just focusing on design as just one thing about buildings or about books or about furniture wasn't it for me. So I wanted to understand how God was able to do all these things, using design as a foundation. And I saw a quote on, I think it's Chris Do, is a very popular designer, and
Mm-hmm.
he was wearing a cap one time like that. And on the cap, it was written, "God is a designer," and that resonated with me so much that I was like, "Yes, this is true." So the very first designer was God, and if I call myself a Christian, or like I call myself a Christian creative, then
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to understand, where this thing actually started from, and it started from God. So seeing it as a way of life is just like me living my life as though I'm trying to create the same way God created. Because if we're created in the image of God, then we also ought to be the same way God did, like the things He did, or following His footsteps. And that's what really guides me to be, to be the designer I am today. And if I'll talk about who I am right now, I'll just say I'm a simple creative who is trying to experience life from a simple point of view and at the same time be creative with it. Because there are two extremes when you try to compare what people call design today and living simple. It kind of seems like two different parts, but bringing the two together, seeing how you can easily make a life for yourself without having to be too complex or having too much stuff or focusing on the irrelevant stuff. So I found a way to just make sure that I kind of use the things that bring meaning to my life, and whatever doesn't really add value to me, I kind of let it go. And this is a concept I discovered from the life of, I'm trying to remember who he is now. All right, so it was the life of Paul. So,
Mm-hmm.
Paul was a very fantastic guy, and there's so many things about him, but I was able to pick out certain things from him where you understand that whenever he realizes that something shouldn't be what he should be doing, he lets go of it, and that is the end. He never goes back to them. So, whatever doesn't add value to my life, I kind of let it go. And, experiencing this particular journey for the past 4 years now, I would say it has been difficult and at the same time interesting because it's a journey. You keep learning as time goes by. So, right now, I'm just a simple guy trying to experience life and not make things too complicated.
So when you say that you let go of things that don't add value, are you talking about things, people, ideas, or all of it and everything?
Actually, it's all of it because sometimes you might, be tied to certain persons that they're not good for you,
Mm-hmm.
and you know that you need to let go. But there's this human nature that maybe I would need this person later on, maybe, and all those maybe elements kind of bring us down. So it's just a concept that I found very encouraging to me because if I know something is bad for me, the best thing for me to do is just let it go. It's difficult to let things go, but after you've been able to practice it over a period of time, it becomes a little bit easy. But then
Mm-hmm.
it's a difficult thing as well because there are some people you've been tied to for a long time, people you're friends with, people they've really helped you, but it gets to a point where you just need to part ways.
Yeah, and
And
I like that idea. And I also read something too about like physical, stuff and excess. So
yeah,
someone, I think it was in one of the I don't know, I'm not even going to think of, but they said that clutter is nothing but postponed decisions.
Exactly.
And I think that's exactly what you're talking about. So it's just when you decide to kind of strip everything back to its basics, you're essentially just making a lot of decisions. And the absence of the space means that you are more certain of who you are. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
And I don't know about you in Nigeria, but over here in the US, I mean, we are the most consumer culture you can think of. And so there's a lot of pressure to conform to that. So being minimalist is kind of a rebellion to that cultural norm, would you say?
Yeah, that's true. So one of the main reasons why this idea of living simple or becoming a minimalist was very particular to me was because growing up, I lived in a house where there was just so much clutter.
Mm-hmm.
Like it got to a point where, I went to school, and returning back from school, I realized that my mom already took over my closet, like everything. I didn't have anywhere to put my clothes. And then she would still come in trying to look for just one piece of clothing, and she can't find it because there's just too much. So that was when I started to, think really deep that I can't try to live my life this way, because there's so much time. There's very little time we have. 24 hours seems never to be enough. So why spend a bigger part of that time cleaning, looking for things that are missing? Things there are sometimes that things are just right in front of you, but because there's too much stuff, you can't really find it. So cutting down all these things to the bare essentials made life easy for me. Like if I drop something somewhere in my workspace right now, I know where it is because I don't have two of those things. It's just one. So I know where I kept it and I know where to go to. And it helped me shift from um, you know, being always in a hurry to actually, taking my time to do things I need to do. For example, one of the major experiences I had that I can still remember to date that kind of pushed this entire idea of being a minimalist is, I remember there was a particular morning I was trying to get ready for church, and I woke up 5 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
Like I woke up 5 a.m. I was ready.
Mm-hmm.
By 6 a.m. I was ready. I already had my bath. I was ready just to pick out clothes and wear. And I spent the next 2 hours picking out one particular piece of clothing, dropped it. It doesn't look good. It's too big. I don't think this is okay. And then I spent 2 hours on that. And eventually I got to church really late, and I was, punished for coming late.
What time does
So
the church service start?
So church service starts by 7:15
Oh,
because
okay.
there's
So
usually
yeah,
like
you
the
were
workers
you were
meeting.
you were
So
really late.
I was late. So that was the time I decided that this would never happen to me again. So and I know on a normal day I will still wear the same t-shirt, or I'll still wear t-shirt and jeans anywhere I'm going to. So why do I have all the 17 different jackets in my wardrobe, all the normal corporate t-shirt? I have about 17 of them. I remember there was a particular time that I was checking through my piece of clothing, and I realized that I had about 15 pairs of socks I haven't worn in 2 years, and that just stopped it from me. Like I wanted to just go simple as possible.
Yeah, and I really like that you bring that point up because I'm kind of in that point in my life too. I'm looking around and I cannot even justify um, every purchase I make because I don't even know what I have sometimes. And I can't justify why I allow myself to be so stressed about the placement of everything. So that's a really, really good point. And so, question number 3, we went over time, no big deal. Question number 3 is who will you be? So, right now, you are the simple creative. You do freelance work, you do podcasting, you do design and brand building, community building too. I want to add that. That's very important. And like you said, your parents may be still on the fence. You seem really determined about it though. So, what's the vision long term? Who will you be?
All right. I can honestly say that I'm more than just this designer I'm right now,
Mm-hmm.
although I'm still trying to figure out what I would be. But I can honestly say that it will become really interesting to me if I can understand exactly why I'm still here, because there's a lot of time left. I wouldn't say a lot of time, but there's still some time left to figure out exactly what you should be doing, and how long you need to do it for. And remembering the life of Jesus just encourages me that 3 years was just he needed to just do everything he needed to do, even though there's been a lot of years in the making. But then that short period of time covered so much that the entire world is still feeling, the impact of what happened then. So I really don't believe too much in what would I be, because I'm very focused on who I am right now and just want to see how God takes me through this entire journey. Because you're giving yourself, it's good to make plans, it's good to, kind of see into the future. But then the truth is, only God knows what's going to happen. You can only predict, you can only, guess. So I'm constantly working towards making sure that I understand who God wants it to be. And it's not, I've kind of, studied a lot of, biblical characters, and I've seen how God will just tell them a little bit of what will come. He never shows them how you will get there. For example, he just called Abraham and said, look to the stars. This is how your offerings would be. But God didn't tell him that you'll be barren for so many years. This would happen to you. Your wife will be taken away from you and so many other things. So it's just by, following God blindly and just trying to, just move around with whatever leading he gives. Sometimes it might seem stupid doing some things God is telling you to, like quit your job or stop doing this particular thing. I remember, it was sometime last year, I was doing this brand series, and, I kind of got this leading from the Holy Spirit to stop doing it. I don't know why. I didn't bother to ask, but I just felt, okay, I've been doing this thing for, 6 months. Maybe it's time to actually stop and focus on something bigger. And that was how a couple of other things were birthed, and, it's becoming something really big today. I never focused on, all those things at the very beginning, but then the moment that particular series stopped, something bigger came along, and I just decided to just obey blindly, even though it's not as easy as it sounds.
No, it's
But,
not.
but I can say, who will I be? I would love to be someone who God is leading and taking to the place he wants me to go to.
That's awesome. Like, I know you said it started at a church, but what lessons, I guess, if we want to use that answer, what lessons do you want to keep and hold on to that God has taught you and take them with you wherever God leads you?
One big lesson is you never let the gospel out of your mouth. Like let it leave. It should always be there, because as much as we think we don't have the space or the time to do all these things God wants us to do, I've been able to see it this way, that everybody, is a minister or a pastor in one way or the other. You might not have a pulpit, but then the skills you have, the things you've done, the degrees you have, these things are just tools that can help you push the message of God even to the farthest place. And I saw my creative career as a pulpit for me, because I call myself a Christian creative, not because it's a title, but because it's who I am. Sometimes people, try to understand, why do you call yourself the Christian creative? And I'm like, you can't really separate God and creativity, because he's the entire foundation of all these things. So why separate these two things? And seeing that, pan out, I would never forget that my origin is God, and that's, the entire foundation of my creativity. So I always need to remind myself that whatever it is I'm doing right now comes from God. And if God is taken out of everything I'm doing, then there's nothing I'm doing. So.
That's awesome. And yes, I love that you mentioned that, because for me, like we were talking about before when we were prepping, I dropped my dance team, and that was what I loved more than anything. I dropped the dance team I was coaching because I felt God told me to. And it took me a whole year to wrestle with that decision. And I was still trying to find excuses, and God would always show me. Like I said, I'm going to go to nationals one more time and compete to prove to myself that it wasn't an accident that we won. And then the pandemic happened. And then there were so many things. I just kept praying, and then God would answer them. And it was almost like he was yelling at me, because it was so obvious at that point that I needed to let go. And I just had to surrender, because I was very comfortable in that position, and I didn't want to let God lead. And so everything that I'm doing now, it is, like you're saying, confusing sometimes. You feel silly. But it's definitely something that's way more satisfying, because I feel closer to God every time I do something. Like when I booked your interview, like I felt like that was God revealing something to me. Whenever I have a little bit of success, I know it's what's God had planned for me and what God designed. And I mean, people really try to seek comfort in the world, right? Like my brother in the beginning of this pandemic was very, very stressed out. And he said, I just want to know that I'm okay. Like there's no answers. And I go, doctors practice medicine. They practice. That's a very intentional selection of a word. That means they don't always get it right. That means even if they have the best training, there's still a degree for human error. And the only one that's really going to know is God. And he was like, well, that isn't encouraging, Michelle. And I was like, but it's the truth. And I mean, everything that we do and everything that humans, for all of their grandeur, have achieved, it's still only a fraction of God's design. Going back to your phrase, God is a designer. I mean, we only understand, like, I don't know, 2-3% of what DNA actually does. We only understand or know a certain degree of what's in the ocean. I mean, we have no idea the depths of the design around us. And it's just about realizing that instead of trying to hold on to your control, I think. I don't know.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's go into the final question. We like to tell people, or the BTC audience at the end, some advice. So we know that everybody here is motivated. We know that everybody here wants to grow. So what is your take on this question? How can listeners avoid clocking out?
Clocking out is, it can be a very scary thing, just thinking about it. But I would say just try to connect with the source of time itself. Because there's sometimes I've seen certain persons that I look up to in a way, do things, and I'm, marveled at how they do it. Like, I know a particular pastor who is a pastor. He writes books, he writes movie scripts. He has about 4 PhDs or more. Mm-hmm. And he's doing all these things at the same time. And I'm wondering, do we have the same 24 hours? It just doesn't make sense to me. And still, he wakes up around 5 a.m. in the morning, sleeps around 3 a.m. or 2 a.m. Well, and it's just mind blowing to me. And I only realized that if you just give your entire totality to God, time won't become a problem. So if you really want to live a life and not really clock out, try and connect with the source of time itself, because we've seen how God has done wonders before. How a man didn't die, he took him away by chariots, and so many other things that God has done. So if you neglect that part of, God himself, who created all these things we're talking about, who the Bible, talked about as he has been before the mountains were formed, then it only makes sense that you try to find your, your connection back to your creator, because there's always that part of us that kind of needs to connect back to the part of us we can't see. Everything we see right now is physical, and there is a part that is not physical that controls what is happening to us right now. So if you don't want to clock out, connect with your source. I think that's the only thing I can say to you right now.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned that the physical and the spiritual, because someone in my past episode said that the pandemic was actually just a physical manifestation of a spiritual pandemic, right? And that we were already all wearing masks spiritually, and that we were all already isolating spiritually. And so when we don't address those spiritual concerns, they manifest in this way, in the earthly realm. And I thought that was very insightful. And I really like that you're saying too, just connect with time and make the use of it correctly. Because I mean, yeah, people tell me all the time, because I wrote a book, like I told you, doing the podcast, teaching. I'm working on a PhD. I didn't want to mention that.
That's awesome.
And thanks. And yeah, I have a couple of things like online courses and a business in the works. So people always think I'm not focused, but I'm even more focused now. It's just that I really trust that God will lead me where I need to. And so if he tells me to do something, I'm going to do it. And if it feels overwhelming, maybe to somebody else it does, but to me, it feels like a duty almost to God. So one final thing before we wrap it up and just reflect. I like that point that you also said about how everybody can have their pulpit, but it doesn't even have to be exclusive to a church. So a pastor that I was watching too, he had a whole series called The Modern Church. And he was saying, that there are certain things that you can't say, I guess, at the pulpit. So there are skills and evangelism that only business people can do, that only creatives can do, that only teachers can do. So everybody has their role in the kingdom if we're talking about God. And I just think that's a really important point to make. Is there anything else you want to add to that, or you want to wrap it up and reflect?
So one way I've seen this entire thing of not having a pulpit and still being able to do God's work is There was an experience I had in the university. So there's this very, like, in my class, this is like, she's the best student in the class.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a particular, course that people have been failing in the years past. And then, it was our turn to take that particular course, and everybody was, there was a lot of panic
Mm-hmm.
because like 70% of the class usually fails that particular course, looking from the history of the entire course.
Mm-hmm.
So the girl decided to do like a tutorial for everybody in the class, and we all attended. And during the tutorial, she was teaching everybody how to do these things. People, started to understand, and it became really easy for everybody. And then, so one person in the class just asked the question and said, "Wait, how do you know all these things?" And she said, "I don't know them. God reveals them to me." And the entire class went, commotion was everywhere.
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean? Like, how is that even possible? And then right there, she stood up and she made an altar call, and half of the class gave their life to Christ.
Wow.
And I was crazy in my spirit trying to understand what just happened. And I realized that if God has given you something that you're really good at, that thing can become the source of, it can become like the mantle for you to take on this entire work the way you ought to. She was brilliant. She had, it was like the perfect opportunity for her to preach the gospel. And, she gave people what they wanted, and then she was able to win their hearts over because, she already used what they wanted, as you can see it in her, as a foundation for, them to come to Christ. And that's what really motivates me to, keep doing what I'm doing. Because if that only encounter, just one class can win almost 70 persons at the same time, come on, that's huge.
Yeah.
So,
I'm really
so I
glad
would
you
say,
shared that story. That gave me goosebumps.
so I would say that if you're really good at something, don't hide it, because that can be the mantle for you. If you talk about several persons in the Bible, all Moses had was a rod, and the rod has been in his hands for more than 40 years. But he didn't know that that's the salvation in his hands. And that was what God used. So there is something you already have that God can use. If only you allow yourself, open up to God's leading, you will do his work. And you probably don't even need the pulpit.
Yeah. And I mean, if you're unsure if that's your gift, that can be the devil talking to you, trying to hold you back from sharing your gift. So, yeah, we did awesome. You only went over the timer one time, so you beat the clock. How do you feel?
I'm glad, because at the very beginning I was tensed, trying to understand if I should speak too fast or too slow. Yeah.
No, so the experience was okay, right? Like it feels nerve-wracking, but then you just kind of find a flow, I guess.
Yeah, it kind of gave me this, freedom to, express myself, and at the same time know that I have to beat the time or beat the clock. So yeah, it's
Yeah,
amazing.
that's the whole point. I just, we don't have to be aimless, and every word we can speak matters, and every thought that we have can change a life. That's the whole point. So adding this whole variable or limit is actually just to really focus the brain and get the good juices out. So I'm really, really happy with everything that you shared. I'm really happy we connected. I know there was like a little hiccup on your end, but I was just like, I hope he comes. I hope he comes. So thank you so much, because yeah, I know we're like in literally different continents, but I think we're trying to do the same things. And I think people just need to see that our missions don't have to be geographically limited. So
Yeah.
so thank you so much. And we're clocking out here, guys, but don't you clock out in your own life. Thanks.